Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in whichever part of the world. Welcome to Pakistan Dreaming. So, first of all, huge congratulations to the Park Dreaming team for the inaugural event. Definitely very exciting to see this, and a lot of amazing sessions till now. Couple more hours to go. So, in this session, we're going to cover day in the life of a Salesforce consultant. A fairly short session, but the idea behind is we've all heard what Salesforce consultants are. There are a lot of training materials out there. Everybody's trying to build that skill set. But what I wanted to give you over sort of my experience is how does a typical day in the life of a fairly busy Salesforce consultant look like? So today's session is really like living the life of a Salesforce consultant, walking in his or her shoes and going through that entire day. So we'll try to jam pack that day in a very short session, and also through that process, try to understand what sort of skills the consultant needs to use, and what's the value a Salesforce consultant brings to any Salesforce project. So with that quick introduction about myself, I'm a senior principal in the global Salesforce team at Slalom. Been in the Salesforce ecosystem for a long time now. Hold many certifications, and I have a website which I co-founded called Salesforce Couple. Apart from Salesforce, I love creating and solving puzzles. I love playing chess and table tennis, or ping pong, as you would know it in US and some other countries. So with that, let's quickly get to what we're going to talk about today. So before going to the day in the life of a Salesforce consultant, I want to just set the context of what is a Salesforce consultant's role, right? So in my experience, there are a few key aspects of what a Salesforce consultant does, and we'll walk through those. The first and foremost is you're solving business problems using Salesforce. So Salesforce consultant is primarily about solving business problems. So the key here is you're looking at the business side of it. You're not solving just a technology problem. You're not trying to do a fix on something which is not working on the technical front, but you're trying to relate it to and actually add value from a business facing side. Now, it could, of course, have different meanings. It could be something as big as creating more revenue streams. It could be as big as creating more lead streams, but it could be also as simple as just creating a small better user experience for the end user. But at the end of the day, it's a business problem, and you're using Salesforce. So you're combining the worlds of Salesforce, understanding Salesforce technology, and solving business problems as a consultant. Also, it's important to understand that we as consultants deliver innovative solutions. And the reason is when you have a typical problem you're trying to solve for, there are multiple ways of tackling it. You can make a simple field required on various different ways. How do you do it? Depends on what best fits that particular business need. Right? So to be able to look at different ways of solving a problem and come up with innovative solutions is also a part of what the consultant does. It's not just trying to use the oft repeated methods of solving something. Also, consultants work with various teams, and various teams means across stakeholders. You have to get inputs and insights from many people. You have to be able to speak to different teams and really understand what they need. So there could be technology, there could be business, there could be various aspects within all these teams. So you could have CXOs, you could have sales reps, you could have testers, you could have architects. Right? And with that, also, you're a bridge between the technical and business teams. So this is key for a Salesforce consultant, because you're understanding the technology and you're also understanding business. You're really the conduit between the two, to be able to connect the two, so that when you're talking to a technical team, you may be talking record types and page layouts. When you're talking to business teams, you may be talking about what the user will see when they log into Salesforce. So you should be able to adapt your style when you're talking to different stakeholders in different ways. And finally, and of course, the foremost end goal is you are delivering business value. It all comes to that. At the end of the day, any consultant is trying to work with the business partners, or the people who are the stakeholders who are using the Salesforce solution. And you're sitting with them, alongside them, trying to help them succeed. So you're really delivering business value. Now, I wanted to set this context first before I go into an actual the presentation part, which is the day in the life of a Salesforce consultant, because all of it sort of ties back to this. Every part of the activities which we're doing, which we'll walk through the entire agenda for the day and go through each of the steps, they all, in some form or the other, go back to what that value the Salesforce consultant provides. So with that, let's go through. I would have typically had an agenda, of course, but since this is the day in the life, the agenda is really the calendar for the day. Right. So this is a sample calendar of a fairly busy Salesforce consultant working on multiple projects. So as you can see, I've got the first half and half hour free. After that, there's a high-level requirements overview for a new project. So it's one of the early discussions trying to understand what the big picture is, get an overview of the project is. So we've got a few key stakeholders who've come with a high-level business problem. So about an hour and a half trying to go through that. In that, after that, there's another project the consultant is working on, which is a little more in-depth. So at 11 a.m. there's an in-depth requirements discussion, which is on a supply chain automation piece. So a little more specific. It's a project which is already ongoing for a couple of months, but this is one of the features which is being discussed for a little bit of the future. Of course, we get a little bit of time for lunch, luckily. And then after that, the consultant will head over to another part of the building, the executive wing, where there's some roadmap planning happening. So there's a multi-cloud strategy which one of the customers is looking for, and they want to get some insights. What do you think as a consultant would work? So this is not going to be specifics. It's a 1.5 hour overview, and it just sort of talking at a very high 50,000 feet level. After that, there's about half an hour calendar free, after which the consultant will go to another meeting at 3 p.m., which is a pre-sale support for a Microsoft CRM to Salesforce migration project. So this is not even, the project's not even started. This is right in the bidding process. You're a consultant for a particular company, and you want to understand how do we bid for that. So if folks are familiar with RFP or request for proposal processes, a client may ask different consultants for estimates and what do you feel, how long this will take, what's the resources, what's your approach, and so on. So this is where the consultant's going to add some value. And then towards the end of the day, there's a design review session with the technical team. So it's going to be a little more technical focused, but then again, you're still wearing multiple hats as a consultant all the time. And luckily, the last half hour of the day is a little free, and we'll see how we can make best use of all these free times. So with that, we'll start off with going through the day and start off with our 9 a.m. Free slot, which as a consultant, we've got a bit of time, which is typically a luxury, and you are going to use that for planning the day. So this time, you'd go through what are the to-do items, what are the meetings, do some prep work, make sure you got your notes in order. You've sort of thought through what you want to talk about, and really get prepared for what is coming up during that entire day. And as you can see from the previous slide, there is a jam-packed agenda of various different types of activities. Of course, if you get some free time, you can catch up on things like Salesforce news and community activities. Of course, we're right in the middle of a wonderful event, and in a few days we've got an even bigger Dreamforce event coming up. So this is the season for Salesforce news and activities and announcements and all the trailblazers coming up. So definitely great to catch up on that as well. You need to be in touch with the Salesforce world as part of a Salesforce consultant. So with that, the half an hour goes by pretty quickly, and you head over to your first meeting. So this is where as I said, it's a high-level requirements overview. It's an overview of a business process and some key success factors. Now, this discussion. We've got some 2-3 stakeholders from a particular part of the organization which captures donation requests for non-profit organizations and starts processing them. So they sort of handle that wing of the company, and they want to see if this can be automated in Salesforce. And this is really high level, right? We've not even started the project. This is an initial discussion. They want to get some thoughts around it, but they do have a business process assigned. So in this, what does a consultant do, right? But before we see what the value the consultant brings, let's see what are the skills which are important here to be successful. In such scenarios, one of the most important skill sets for a consultant, and I think this is foremost in a lot of activities for a consultant, is listening. You have to understand and try to put yourself in the business stakeholders' shoes. Try to think of different scenarios. Pay attention to the requirements. Many times there would be requirements which are very clearly identified, but also in your experience you will see that there are requirements which are not really clarified very clearly. They're implicit, unstated, where you have to really cull them out, many times infer them between the lines and dig deep. and which also sort of leads to you have to ask the correct questions to be able to get those requirements clearly, and also make sure you're in this particular meeting you're keeping it at that high level. You don't go into very specifics, but you make sure you're understanding the high level business process. You're asking the correct questions which lead to that. And also to balance such discussions where you are having a high level requirements overview, you need to understand the value of Salesforce's different products, the clouds, the offerings. So sometimes you may not have a specific cloud identified. Sometimes it may be just something you build on the platform. So you need to understand what is really going to be a high level fitment for this. You don't have to make a commitment, but at least in your mind start playing off, okay, this is what the business is looking for, and sort of mental map against that with what Salesforce offers. And with those skills in such meetings, the value the consultant would bring is the ability to map the business scenarios to Salesforce technology solutions. So here's really where you're showing value to some of the key factors of what a Salesforce consultant really is, right? You also have to understand the pain points, and this is where some of the business understanding comes in. Really see what is it that why do they want this business process, what's really the bottleneck, what are they using right now which is not working, right? Is it taking too long, is the system failing, are they not able to do good reporting? So what are the key pain points which they're trying to solve for? We don't want to miss that, because that's what your solution has to also pivot around. And also in such cases, what can happen is, especially when you have business processes which are not very clearly articulated, documented, or defined, you also bring the value where you're keeping the conversation structured. You're trying to make sure there's a clarity in the way the high level business process is presented. So yes, it's a high level meeting, but there's a lot of listening and sort of soaking in what is there. But also there's immense value which a Salesforce consultant brings in such discussions where you're keeping that conversation structured, driving the discussions, and sort of mentally planning around, this is what we can do for this particular business need. Right? So again, fairly interesting and important discussions which happen when you are playing the role of a Salesforce consultant. So after this, we'll head to our next meeting, and it's 11 a.m. and this is slightly different. This is an in-depth discussion around a specific requirement. So this is a project which I said already 2 months underway. There are a few sprints already obviously down. We've already had one release, and we are looking to have the next release in the next sprint. But also they're talking about what are we going to do down the line. One specific part of a requirement which is looking to be groomed is around tracking quantities of different SKUs or different products which are loaded on trucks for transportation from warehouse to stores. So as you can see, this is a little bit in the details. This is definitely talking about very specific use cases, and you may have different people who are talking to it, but this is typically people on the ground, operational stakeholders who are actually going to be participating in this discussion, who can give you actual value of what they're looking for. And to be able to do well in such meetings as a Salesforce consultant, you need to develop some skills. Of course, core is your Salesforce solution design. You are going to start understanding and really building a solution on this. So make sure you understand how to design a solution, how to map a business requirement to a Salesforce offering, and actually solve for that business problem. And you also have to pay attention to business detail. Now, I very purposefully put business detail because it's not just about capturing every aspect of what is being provided, but it's also anticipating what could happen. So when you're tracking quantities of different products on trucks, okay, and you're talking about transportation, so you may actually capture them when they're loaded, when they're unloaded. How do you account for differences? What if a truck breaks down? What are the different scenarios which could happen, which you probably need to think through even on top of what the business may provide you. So you really need to start wearing some of those different hats, start thinking about from a business stakeholder perspective in a little more detail. And also, especially when you're trying to get this story groomed and help all the stakeholders get to sort of completeness, you have to think through different areas. So when you're looking for, okay, I may have in your mind, you may be thinking, I have a say a custom object which is tracking this, I have different fields. You also need to know that for all these different fields, you probably need to know who's going to update them and who's going to be able to view them, how do you want to present them, and so on. So based on that, you may want to start framing questions. And the questions obviously are not going to be worded in technical terms because you're talking to business stakeholders, but you're going to talk in business terms. But the idea is, you are in your mind, you know that you need all these answers to be able to build a proper Salesforce solution. So therefore, you need to make sure you're driving that completeness in these discussions. So obviously, when you're doing all this, you bring a lot of value. The first thing is, you're solving for a specific business problem using an optimal Salesforce solution. And again, you're solving for the complete business scenario. You're not solving, you're trying to cover everything which could happen, and look at all these different scenarios which could happen, as well as proactively solve and ask for questions which you need to be able to solution this properly. So definitely a very involved and a deep discussion. Again, your Salesforce solution skills are core here to make you successful here. But that's something which a Salesforce consultant does provide. So, like I said, we had our bit of a break, and then of course it's post lunch. I was saying there's a slightly different meeting, next meeting on the agenda, which is a roadmap planning. Now this one's going to be slightly different, right? Because this one is not in the detail. It's not talking about a specific business process. This is high level strategy for Salesforce roadmap architecture. Now you typically would think, oh wait, this is probably a technical architect. Sure, of course, you need a technical architect also probably in this discussion. But here they're considering overall B2B commerce, CPQ part out, cross-cloud solutions. So there's definitely going to be a lot of business scenarios. What's happening right now? What are they looking for? What are the drivers which are going to help make these decisions? You need to be able to overlay that with your business skills as well. So your Salesforce consultant hat comes very important here, because you're really thinking big picture. And in this case, in a sense, you're actually giving more weightage probably to the consulting part, and you know Salesforce at a high level. You're not going to focus on a specific narrow business process. You're looking into the future. You're looking end to end. So for these, you need a slightly varied, broader set of skills. Again, this comes with experience. You probably, if you're starting out on your journey, you may not be involved in these discussions on the word go. So definitely a lot of continuous proactive learning. Now, through an experience with what you're working in Salesforce projects, you will have experience to specific clouds and you will know them very well. But then you do need to know what the Salesforce ecosystem is, right? So you need to spend some time, invest in yourself, do a lot of learning. You definitely need to have an idea of basic business understanding. I'm not saying you need to read P&Ls and you need to do balance sheets and all, but you need to have an idea of what are the drivers for business. How do you drive? What factors help grow revenue? What factors help minimize cost? Where do you bring in operational efficiencies and so on, right? And also, I think one of the important things to be able to grow and collaborate and to grow and contribute in such meetings is to be collaborative, right? You have got a lot ecosystem of Salesforce consultants in the Trailblazer community, and definitely learn from each other, and spend time sort of sharing, comparing notes, what you've learned in your discussions, and everyone comes the wiser out of it. So this skill sets definitely is something which needs to be planned for and worked on, which you do along with your experience. It will definitely fast track you in that journey. And the value, of course, is really true Salesforce consulting. You're really thinking and giving a consultative approach of what should be done. You're talking about a big picture understanding and also relating that to key business drivers. So you should be able to layer all that in, look at the big picture, and give a perspective on what you feel makes sense for that particular business need. Where do these products fit in? How do you think this would work? So obviously this gets complemented with a lot of other inputs from different contributors for such meetings. You definitely have technical architects, you have potentially finance, you probably have the business leaders who would be driving and leading that discussion. But you lend a very unique perspective where you understand business and technology, and are providing a balance for that from a big picture perspective. So definitely a very interesting thing, and of course, as Salesforce consultants, if you're involved in these meetings, it's definitely a unique perspective and a viewpoint from which you can contribute. And now, like I said, after that, you get a little bit of a breather, which is great. It's been a very exhausting, intensive day so far. but you have half an hour, so why not spend that time in investing some self improvement? So like I said in the previous meeting, right, one of the things which you need to focus on is proactive learning. So when you get some time, definitely invest in that. Salesforce is, of course, it's undoubtedly one of the easiest places where you have so much of material and content and people who are helping you to learn. But from your own perspective, put together a systematic study plan. Think of these are the things I'm going to learn on in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and so on, and work towards that. Right, you complete your trailhead badges and trail mixes, and maybe do certifications, read blogs and videos, and all these sessions which are there in all these training events, of course. So go through all that, but whatever you get time, put some plan around it. Don't haphazardly try to learn across the place. It's great to even do that, but if you have a systematic study plan, you can really chart out the growth path which you want as a Salesforce consultant. So with that, the half an hour would fly away, and we are now moving into a different meeting. And this is, as I said, it's responding to a request for proposal for a project with a new customer. So this is a pre-sale support you're providing as a Salesforce consultant. And the project overview is around moving from Microsoft CRM to Sales Cloud, with some hint about mobile and reporting requirements. So a completely different lens on what a Salesforce consultant would provide till what we've seen so far, right? And the skills here you will need is really to be able to document and present business value. You want to understand what the requirements are and how do you solve for those. Estimation and resource planning, sort of what skill sets do you need? How much time does this need? What are the assumptions and risks associated with it, right? So to be able to factor all this in are very important skills which you need to pick up as you work. So what you should do as you're working in your career as Salesforce consultant, even in your early jobs when you're doing this, start looking back and see how was the resource, what was the skill mix needed for the project I worked on, how much time did it take, what were the assumptions we made or which didn't hold, or what we learned later. So when you go back and revisit this and start learning, when you're presented with similar scenarios where you have to do such pre-sale support, you'll be able to lend a lot of value. So a lot of retro learning on what you've done, and going back and learning it, what you've actually experienced, is helpful here. And the value the consultant would, of course, bring for such a project is really very key. You are working with minimal information. Typically, RFPs or requests for proposals may not have they will not have detailed business requirements. Of course, there are scenarios where you get much more detail, but you may have to work with less than more. So you have to structure your response around limited information. You have to form broad assumptions, and you should be able to fill in the gaps with sort of dotted lines. So that skill set, of course, is something which you gain with experience. And when you are presenting a proposal, you also want to articulate business value, because at the end of the day, you are selling to the customer. You are trying to get that project, so you should be able to define what is the unique value proposition which you are providing for the customer in solving for this, right? And really, like I reiterated here, experience adds to a lot here. When you worked on projects, your responses to these become much more held in reality. You give much more realistic estimates and responses. All right. And with that, we've got probably the last scheduled meeting for the day, which is at 4:30 p.m., which is a design review. And this is an in-depth discussion around a specific use case. You're talking to the technical team here, and the use cases around automating the update of opportunity probability for some stages, whereas you need a manual override for others. So as you would have seen in typical Sales Cloud implementations, the opportunity object, when you move the stage, your probability changes. You can map the two automatically, but here there's a little bit of a variance from a requirement perspective. So the discussion is a little more technical, definitely, but you also want to balance what the business is looking for. So you want to solve for the business solution, optimal solution design. What's the best way to solve for this? What are the limitations of the solution? So really understand what the risks and gaps are, because what happens if the requirement changes, right? Say they say I wanted a manual override for 3 of the stages, but not for the other 2, and they later change that to I only want a manual override for 1 of them. So is your solution nimble enough to handle that? So you understand those risks, understand the gaps, And also, again, as a Salesforce consultant, you may not be knee deep in all the technology parts of it. You may not know or understand or have as much experience in working with, say, a lot of Apex code or APIs for that matter. So you definitely will get a lot of inputs from the technical team. So you should be able to provide as well as take input. So this is definitely a very collaborative approach with technical teams, where you also have to understand what's the perspective from a technical front, take that input, balance it, and sort of give back what you feel makes best sense. So here again, there are opportunities where you will definitely learn a lot, because you would be interacting with technical folks who've been doing this in a lot more depth than you may have. So take that input, but also balance it with what business is looking for. So that's why your balance of the business ask and the technical solution is your key value which you bring here, and also provide some innovative solutions. You don't have to just think of really out of the box solutions, but are there different ways you can and solve for this, which could be probably even better for the business. Right? This is a little more specific and a little more focused discussion, and different from some of the other meetings we've had till now. All right, we've been sort of rushing through the day, I know, and jam packing a lot of different meetings, and it's time to wrap up the day. So it's just last half an hour. Great to capture all our notes, revise everything, send out the emails, update any tools you need to do, and really sort of put your feet up for work done well, interacting all these different scenarios with different stakeholders, providing value in different fronts. And through that experience, really going through what a typical Salesforce consultant does for their customer, for the business stakeholders, for the project as a whole. So through this entire discussion, what I've been trying to showcase through live examples of how Salesforce consultant would really add value, in a real life example of how that day plays out. So with that, I just want to wrap up this.